My name is Mary Mannix, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the Frederick Historic Sites Consortium. I'm also the Maryland Room Manager at the Burr Arts Public Library. I'm here with my co-chair, Carrie Saavedra, who is the museum manager at Rose Hill, and also Rita Gerlach, who is one of our local authors. For those of you who regularly attended real life Museums by Candlelight, this year, as you probably gathered, we are doing virtual Museums by Candlelight. One of the events that has occurred for Museums by Candlelight at the Burr Arts Library for many years now, way over 10 years now, has been our local author showcase. So this year, because Museums by Candlelight is not in real life, we are taking our local author showcase and picking one of our regular authors, Rita here, who has frequently, very kindly been with us for Museums by Candlelight. And we're going to do an interview with Rita, who's just published a new book. Our local author showcase, for those of you who've never walked through the Burr Arts Library when it was going on, picks up local authors. We tend to think very broadly in regards to local, someone who lives within an hour of our area or who writes on a local topic. It's not always people who write strict history. It also includes people who write memoir, who write nonfiction. We've had cookbook authors. Rita is kind of a combination because she does research and she writes historical romance or historical fiction. Rita will tell us exactly what genre she considers herself to be. So thank you for stopping by today, and we'll now be talking to Rita. So Rita, thank you so much for being with us today. And let's start off by telling us who you are. Rita, give us the basics of who you are.
Well, let's see, who am I? I am a wife and a mother of two boys, two grown boys. One of my sons is in the United States Navy, and I live here in Frederick. I was born in Washington, D.C. and raised in Wheaton to a family where we have quite a few writers in my family.
Really? Professional
that are on my mother's side.
People who write. When you say writers,
some that are professional.
Yep.
Some that are professional and well-known. I won't do any name dropping. But yeah, I think it has to do with our Irish heritage on my mother's side. You know, the Irish storytellers. Yep. So I consider myself a storyteller. And that's basically who I am. I'm just an average gal.
How long have you been writing, professionally? How long have you been publishing your book?
Okay, so as far as how long have I been published, I've been published since 2001. So that's 19 years. I did start writing in the mid to late 90s. So it took a while before I got published, but I'm both traditionally published and I'm indie published too.
Well, that seems to be one way that a lot of authors have been pushing their books out in the last 20 or so years. And it used to be libraries were like, well, we don't buy books like that, but it has really become almost a genre in and of itself.
It absolutely has. In fact, amongst my fellow writers, we refer to it as being a hybrid author.
And how would you, if your books can be categorized, how would you categorize your books? What's your genre? What is the format of your book?
I write romantic historical fiction, and it has an inspirational bent to them. I don't write the traditional historical romance Harlequin type thing. So that's what that's the genre that I would put it within, is romantic historical fiction.
Romantic historical fiction.
And can you tell us how you go about the process of kind of researching and learning a little bit about each of the time periods that you're writing about?
Oh my goodness, thank God for the internet. Because when I started writing, I was at the library all the time, to do research, and it was so hard sometimes to find out, factual information. But with the internet now, there's so much that you can do. Some people use Wikipedia. That can be a good source, except you still have to check that as well, the facts, because anybody can write anything for Wikipedia. But there's various websites that I go to research something. Okay, like say, like for example, right now, as I'm writing this World War I novel, there's a website that gives you a whole timeline throughout. I think it's from the year 400 all the way down to 2020. And it gives you events that occurred during those times. So I'll go through those. I'll look at like at 1918. I'll see what the different events were. And I could kind of pick out different ones that I think would fit into the book. And then I'll read extensively for those. Genealogy websites. Now, the current book for that I just had published, which is Mercy's Refuge. This was an amazing book for me to research. I had so much fun. And one of the things I did is I read William Bradford's book of Plymouth Plantation. He wrote it in 1643. And it was the story of the separatists. He wrote it down like a diary from the time they were facing persecution in England, and then they went over to Holland, and up to that time of, before he passed away in 1643. It was amazing to read, especially his accounts about the Mayflower, the struggles that they faced coming over here. And it wasn't just, they got on a ship and they sailed across the sea and they landed in Plymouth. It was pretty brutal, very brutal. I was shocked. And there was so much in there of incidents that I had no idea. So I dramatized those incidents in the book. And I tried to follow the sequence of events as he laid them out. So that's one way. I mean, there's so many various ways that you can research. And it depends on the genre that you're writing in. If you're writing like contemporary fiction, that's a whole different thing, and you can find out a lot of stuff that's going on currently. But delving into the historical is it can be a little more difficult. You have to kind of like sift through, but you do your research online. The other thing that I do when I'm researching is I look at images. For example, the World War I book. I might type in Red Cross nurses World War I. I'll read about them, but I'll also do an image search where I can actually visualize their uniforms, the way they dressed, and the culture of the period. So yeah, it's a lot of fun, actually. I love doing it. Some people don't like the research, but I do. I have so much fun with it. So I hope that answers your question.
Very much so, very much so.
Not an easy question.
In regards to William Bradford, because I think about when I was in graduate school, nobody sits down and reads the entire William Bradford diary. You read like 3 paragraphs, a couple of pages. Was it in like his original language, or had it been transcribed and updated in some way? Not that it would be, using slang, but that it was, did it sound like 16 whatever, or did it sound like he was speaking today?
No, it was written in the king's language.
The king's language
of that period. So, but there's been people that have translated it into a more modern version.
Yes, that's what I was trying to say.
And there's even some for kids and teens where it's been translated in a way that they could understand it. But I read both. I read the Old English and the translated version. I'd recommend that they try to read it in the more modern English. It is fascinating to read because it's his account of what happened,
right?
Not somebody else's version.
And for those who may not know who he is, who was William Bradford?
William Bradford was a separatist leader who sailed on the Mayflower with his wife, Dorothy, and he eventually did become one of the governors of Plymouth Plantation.
So as I think
From
probably,
everything I read,
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I got to know him and realized that he, not only was he very strong in his beliefs and his faith, he was a very brave and courageous man. I think he's kind of like been brushed under the carpet, so to speak, you know, and I think he's somebody that people should look at him, because he played a huge role in the founding of our country.
Mhm.
And he was the signer of the Mayflower Compact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So as it's probably been alluded to, your present novel, your most recent book that came out, it takes place during the period of the founding of the Mayflower and of the Pilgrims.
Yes. Yeah, it takes place in the year 1620.
Mhm.
And, you know, I have a heroine in the story. Her name is Mercy. And the story begins in England. I won't tell you too much, but it's her adventure in England, and how that she ends up going to Holland because a catastrophe occurs, and she ends up at her uncle's farm outside of Linden in Holland. There she joins up with the separatists. She marries and she sails on the Mayflower. She becomes quite close with Dorothy Bradford, and Dorothy plays a big part of the story as well. So a lot of the separatists, like William Bradford, Dorothy Bradford, Mary Brewster, who I grew to admire immensely. What a courageous, brave woman she was, are all in the story as well.
And what Rita, what inspired you to choose that time period and that specific group of people to write about?
Okay, I'll try to be brief. What happened was, I had never had it like in my mind, for years. Some people will say, "Oh, I've thought about this book for years and years." But what happened was, I got a call from Gilbert Morris, who he is passed, but at one time he was a best-selling author of historical fiction.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to do a series called The First Comers that was part Jamestown, Roanoke, and Plymouth.
Interesting.
So he and I collaborated on a proposal and sent it into our mutual agent at the time, and he couldn't. He just was having a really hard time finding a place for it. So Gilbert's wife passed, and it was very difficult for him. And finally, he said to me, is there something about the First Comers that would inspire you to write your own book without me collaborating with you? And I said, well, yeah, I think I would like to do something on the Mayflower, on the people that came to Plymouth. So he was like, go for it. Because at that point he was dying, and his energy level and everything was just depleted. So he was a big part of this, where he encouraged me, and he told me, write it from your heart. So I was faced with a medical crisis, where I came down with breast cancer, and that was 2013. Things kind of like got set back because of that. I went through a year of treatment, and once that year was over and I was beginning to heal better and get my energy and everything back, I started working on it. But it took a few years. then I got interrupted. I hate to use the word interrupted, but I did. I got interrupted by Burr Publishing to write 5 novellas for them, which I was in a collection with other authors. Absolute fun. And so that took up about 2 years. That took about 2 years of doing all those. And then I was like, I got to go back to Mercy's Refuge, and finished it up this year and got it out there. So, yeah.
And when did it get published? Is it available now for Christmas presents that people might want to go buy?
It was published in September this year. So it's only a few months it's been out.
Okay.
So
good, a good Christmas present option for anyone who likes to read historical fiction. Be a good option.
Oh yeah, yeah. This is great. Any of my books would be a great Christmas present.
Well, do you want to tell us about? I mean, Mary can tell me, but do you want to tell us about any of your other books? We started with talking a little bit about your first book. You want to tell us a little bit about maybe what that first book was and how you got inspired to write that?
Yeah. Oh gosh, I started writing that at kind of like in 1998, I think. Good grief, that's a long time ago. And I'd always loved to write, and I wanted to, and something sparked to get me to do it. And one of them was I went down to Wonder Book, and I found this author from the late 1890s, early 1900s, named Mary Johnston. She was in Virginia and wrote all these great historical romances of Virginia in the early days, all the way up to, I think, the founding, all the way up to, she wrote a book that was 2 Civil War books. And I was just so inspired by the beauty of her writing. And I thought, I want to try this. So the very, very, very first book I wrote, I did not send it to anybody because it was very raw, right? And it was too short. I just kind of went on. Then I wrote a book called The Rebel's Pledge. And The Rebel's Pledge takes place in the 1690s. It is from the viewpoint of my hero, which a lot of publishers are like, oh, no, it's got to be the girl first, her point of view. But I wanted to write Matthew Hale's point of view. And he is a hero in every sense of the word. So my writing has progressed since then. I mean, that was 20 some years ago. But yeah, that was my first book. So it's kind of dear to me, special. The second book I wrote actually is in 2 parts. And that is Revolutionary War era Frederick County. And that was fun to research. And that was at a time when I didn't have the internet.
And I have a question about Mercy. Well, 2 questions. So you had started it a while back, but it wasn't until you got finished, until it got published this year, which is also in some ways a very good year for it to get published, isn't it? Isn't this the big anniversary year for the Mayflower?
Yes, it is. This is the 400th anniversary of the sailing of the Mayflower. And they landed in the New World in November, in the dead of winter. So it is special to me.
Yeah, so it's almost as if, universe was holding you back until 2020.
Oh yeah.
It came back.
That's a good way to put it. Yep.
And
I mean, timing, right? The timing of it is,
Is Mercy based at all on a real person or a real name, or is she completely fictional?
She is fictional. She's fictional, and her husband is also fictional. So I have a mix, and what I did is at the end of the book, I placed, so that the readers would know, I'll show you here. I placed, well, I don't know if you can see it, but It's it's a list of the separatists in Mercy's Refuge. So like Wayne Bradford, Dorothy Bradford, her son, and so forth, who are mentioned. And then I have another one that is others that were aboard the Mayflower
Yes.
that are in the book, and also the masters and the crews that are mentioned in the story. This way people, and they can, there's a little tiny bio for each person.
Oh, that's
so
wonderful.
they can know more about them.
That's great.
Right.
Yeah, where they were born, you know, and what their lives were like, who they married, how many kids they had, and other things, what their positions were. So yeah, it was really great. I enjoyed doing that little information on each person. So yeah, she's definitely, you know, a fictional character.
Well, and your addendum is a nice addition because since so many everybody else in the book is a real life person, you know, that gives them background so that they can really put into context and they don't start wondering about who's who. I think I have one more question, and Carrie.
Well, okay, sure.
That in regards to how it is that you write, okay, I've had all other authors, you know, I've heard speak about this, is that do the characters come to you? I mean, do they start speaking to you? How do you develop your characters? Like, where did Mercy come from? Did she come in a dream? Did you just start writing and, you know, you started writing in Mercy's language? Or?
For me, it's never like a dream, but you know, I usually start with like a time period that I want to write in, and it's just, they just pop into my imagination, you know. I really don't know how to describe it because I think it's different for every writer, but for me, that they're there. They just, sometimes though, when I'm writing a book, a character will pop up out of the blue. And I'll be like, hello, who are you? You know, which is kind of fun too. But yeah, it really does have to do with the mind and your inspiration, your imagination. You know, it's like when we were kids and we would daydream, you know, and I know for me as a kid, I did a lot of daydreaming and I used to get in trouble for it in school. Stop looking out that window and pay attention, you know. But yeah, and it's kind of what it is. It's like daydreaming.
And when
Just
you were
dream
daydreaming,
up this person.
when you were daydreaming in school, you really were training for your future career, and they just didn't know it.
I wished I'd known that when I was 8 years old, and I could have told Sister Mary Joseph that. Sister Mary Joseph, I am preparing myself for my future.
Yeah, because that's one thing. I mean, I can see writing nonfiction and I can see writing, you know, nonfiction books, but the whole idea of writing fiction is just foreign to me. I would have no idea, like, again, where does this all come from? But I've heard that from other authors, that the people appear and the people start talking and their stories start coming through your brain and through your fingers.
It does. Yeah. And that's probably the most enjoyable part of writing, is these characters coming to life, you know. And you kind of get to know them. And it's so true, by the end of a story, when you're getting ready to write that final sentence and you write the end, you're saying goodbye.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes it's kind of hard to actually say,
right,
this is it, you know, but that's how it is. And I love the whole process. That's why I do it. I don't do it for fame. I don't write for fortune. I write because I love to write.
Well, hopefully we can still give you a little bit of fame, at least here with us today. And before we say
you're so fun,
Rita.
You're so great. I love you guys. Thank
Carrie,
you.
do you have anything else for Rita?
Well, I guess since she's talking about, you know, her a little bit about her inspiration, I was going to ask her, and she talked about one of her mentors in writing. I was going to ask if you were to give some advice to any young writers out there, what might your advice be?
My first advice would be, if you want to write, do it because you love it. And don't look at it as, I'm going to write a book, I'm going to become rich, and I'm going to become famous. That's not the right attitude to have. Just write because you love to write. And then after that, just start. And be open to criticism too, to people that can give you constructive criticism, other writers that could mentor you to help you be a better writer. And read. You know. So that would be my advice.
Great, thank you.
Do it and have fun.
Well, again, thank you so much for being with us today, Rita. Your book, Mercy's Refuge, right? Mercy's Refuge. I've forgotten the title already.
Yes, Mercy's Refuge.
Would make lovely Christmas presents. Where can people get their hands on Mercy's Refuge to purchase?
Best place right now would be go to Amazon. You can get it in ebook, and you can get it in this paperback. Isn't that a beautiful cover?
That is a beautiful cover.
And the back cover is, it goes around there.
All your covers have always been.
Thank you.
Yeah. And we also have the Frederick County Public Libraries has many of Rita's books, and hopefully, books are always coming in, so keep an eye out there. And we do have some of Rita's books in the Maryland room, which cannot be checked out and can't even be visited right now during the pandemic. But when the pandemic is over, if you want to come see the covers, you can come see them and sit in a comfy chair in the Maryland room and read those other ones as well, because we do document, we try to keep track of our local authors for perpetuity. So thank you so much, Rita, for being with us.
That's so awesome.
Thank you to my co-chair, the lovely Carrie Savidra. Thank you for being, and thank you everyone for stopping by here today for Museums by Virtual Candlelight. Make sure you take a look at all the other sites too, and we hope to see you in real life next year. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.